We will begin momentarily. Hello, everyone. Welcome to HR.com's HR Tech Symposium. This event was created to provide HR leaders the resources they need to succeed. We have just introduced new resources and professional development options for you and your teams with our new Prime membership packages. Please visit the HR.com booth in the exhibit hall or contact membership@hr.com to learn more. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Create Better Outcomes with a Collaborative Agile Learning Culture, sponsored by eLearning Brothers. This webcast has been pre-approved for our HRCI credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credit. You will receive an email from HR.com within 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. You may also log in to your HR.com account and view the credits you have received. If you have questions during the webcast, please click on the Q&A box in your webinar controls and type them in. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to our presenters, Christian Wiebel and John Tota.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We are happy to be with you during this conference. My name is John Tota. I'm the Rockstar Learning Evangelist for eLearning Brothers. And I'm joined today by Dr. Christian Wiebel, our Chief Product Officer at eLearning Brothers. So Christian and I have been working together on learning experience design for the past 18 months. And we continually hit on 2 important questions that always stand out to us. First, are we developing and deploying learning with the most efficient process possible? And secondly, how do we implement a more agile learning model? That's what today's presentation is all about. Agile development, which we've heard about for a long time, is no longer just for software developers. It's being rapidly adopted to the learning and development industry because it's proving to be a more effective and seamless model. So you can forget about that old school, siloed and slow content creation process. Learners want content on demand in a more modern format. So your subject matter experts could be recording how-to videos on their smartphones to share with learners on the job in multiple languages simultaneously. In this session, we're going to share how and why this new compelling model works. So first, we want to talk a little bit about what some of the takeaways are that we'd like you to leave from this session with. So first, we'll explain why organizations are seeing better results with peer-to-peer socialized knowledge sharing. Also, we're going to talk about the change in learner content consumption habits and how you can take advantage of it. And finally, how you can facilitate a more modern, agile content creation process. So let's get into it. Before we pass it off to Christian to take us through the content, we're going to do a quick poll. So you'll see this up on your screen right now. If you just hold your phone's camera up to the screen and scan that QR code, and then you're going to be able to tell us just quickly what your role is in your organization. So Christian and I have been doing presentations like this for the last year, and it's always different audiences. So we like to do a quick poll and just know who's here with us today, what your role in the organization is, and that always gives us some good insight into our material and how it's perceived on your end. So I'll leave this up here for just one more moment for anybody to scan the QR code and just quickly answer. And then I'll flip over here and we can see quickly some of the results of who's with us here today. So we've got L&D leaders, HR leaders, training specialists, some executive team. It's always interesting to see when we do this presentation what the shape of the audience is like. And of course, we're kind of represented across the board in a number of different ways here. So now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Christian. He's going to get us kicked off here on the content.
Thanks, John. So here's an example I like to use a lot. In the world famous book and movie Harry Potter, students would sometimes find that in going from one place to another inside their magical school Hogwarts, the route would suddenly change before their eyes and sometimes under their feet. These moving staircases required students to pay attention and to be flexible and adaptable in their journey. This is not unlike the current landscape of organizational learning and development. Rather than a predictable contour along which we can chart a path for our learners, it seems we're navigating a sea of shifting sands that's constantly changing. This requires us to pay attention, to respond to changing needs and new opportunities, to anticipate where things are going, and to be flexible and adaptable. If we don't continue to provide value and remain relevant to our learners, they'll simply go around us as a matter of survival and opportunity, using their own methods, tools, and technologies, and finding or creating their own resources and materials to get and share the knowledge and skills they need to do their jobs. In fact, they're already doing this. With organizations rapidly transitioning from classroom to virtual training over the last couple of years, and the expectation that much of that will continue even as we move through the pandemic, we've seen and will continue to see an increased demand for training. Instructional design teams, training teams, and L&D organizations are being asked to do more, or at least there's certainly the opportunity to do more. But resources and capacity aren't necessarily increasing at the same rate. And in some organizations, they aren't increasing at all. My background, both academically and professionally, is a combination of software development and human learning. My undergraduate degree was in computer science, which I later followed up with a PhD in instructional psychology and technology because I wanted to apply what I knew about software development to what I felt is one of the most important opportunities of this century, using and creating technology to help all people learn in the way they learn best. I've spent the last 25 years in software product development, mostly product management, but also writing code, doing UX design, working with customers, creating roadmaps, managing teams, schedules, budgets, commitments, deliverables, the whole process. I've also had a fair amount of firsthand practical experience with designing and developing instruction and online learning, writing scripts, multimedia production, delivering classroom training, and managing training development teams and process. 20 years ago, I was working at Microsoft during a time when the landscape of software development methodology was beginning to change. At that time, a typical software development release cycle for us in the Microsoft Office group happened every 18 months or so. But many teams were beginning to experiment with relatively new or emerging ways of developing software, with more frequent releases that happened every few months, or in some cases, every few weeks. It was during this time that the Agile Manifesto was signed at a ski resort in Utah in February 2001. Agile, now common practice in software development organizations across the world, was not conceived or invented at this retreat, but the manifesto that resulted from it was a signpost that gave voice and expression and a real sense of camaraderie to those who were driving for this type of change. It provided a statement of values to help software development teams not be so focused on processes, tools, specification documents, contracts, and plans that they aren't able to produce the kinds of high-quality solutions that come through conversation and interaction with others, validation of working software in interactive prototypes, early and continuous customer collaboration, and the flexibility to respond to change and opportunities as new information becomes available. Agile itself is not a method, but a mindset. The Agile Manifesto declared 12 principles that reflect this mindset. These principles include things like satisfying customers through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, welcoming changing requirements even late in development, and delivering working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. So what is Agile software development? In a traditional waterfall method of software development, the entire project is scoped and planned up front, and then output cascades down from one team to the next at each stage in the process. Software development projects using a waterfall approach typically run for several months or even years. In general, it's a process that's resistant to change and focused on meeting delivery dates. The end result is one big outcome at the end of the process. In contrast, with the Agile mindset of software development, scope and requirements unfold and are identified incrementally and not planned all in advance. Time to release is typically 2 to 8 weeks. Change is expected and driven by a constant loop of feedback, which continuously measures how well your product is meeting end user needs. Instead of one big outcome at the end of a long process, there are lots of small releases along the way that build your total product value cumulatively over time. Agile development is iterative. The overall process happens in short, repeating cycles of targeting requirements, designing, developing, testing, and delivering. Agile development is collaborative. Customers, end users, and other stakeholders are involved early and throughout the process. Agile development is incremental. total value delivered accumulates with lots of small releases over time. What are some of the key benefits of being iterative, collaborative, and incremental? If your development is iterative, it means you can deliver value sooner and more frequently to your customers. You can also get really good at process because you're doing it over and over again. If your development is collaborative, you have the benefit of continuous feedback from customers, end users, and stakeholders. If your development is incremental, you don't have to prioritize everything up front. You just have to decide what the next few priorities are. If you're designing, developing, testing, and releasing changes in small increments, you don't have the same level of risk that you do when you're doing one big project. It's much easier to detect errors and make course corrections as you go. An incremental approach also gives you the flexibility to adapt in real time to change or to take advantage of opportunities you didn't know about previously. In these next few slides, I'm going to give you some new terminology and concepts as I lay out what a typical Agile software development process looks like using the Scrum framework. This will help you see the big picture and give us a shared understanding to talk about how Agile principles implemented using the Scrum framework can be applied to activating a flow of peer-to-peer knowledge in your organization. For more information on Agile and Scrum, there's some really excellent resources freely available on these three websites. These are the official websites from the Agile Manifesto signers and the creators of Scrum. Note here that Scrum is not the only way to do Agile, but it's definitely the most common. 75% of respondents in last year's survey report practicing Scrum or a hybrid that includes Scrum. Okay, so let's get into it. Scrum describes three roles: product owner, development team member, and Scrum Master. Here you also see a fourth category, Agile Leaders, that we'll talk about in just a minute. The product owner is responsible for determining product strategy and how to invest the capacity of the Scrum team. They alone determine what goes into the product backlog and the order in which those things will be targeted for development. The Scrum Master is not a master of people, but a master of skill and process who promotes and supports the use of Scrum, provides coaching to the team on Scrum process, and facilitates team interaction and communication. The Scrum development team is a cross-functional team with all the skills necessary to deliver the work. Traditionally, that included front and back-end software developers and quality assurance engineers. In my organizations, that also includes UX designers, instructional designers, technical writers, customer success advocates, and others. An ideal size for most Scrum teams to maximize efficiency in process and communication is 7 to 8 people, but your team may be a few less than that or may be a few more. Now, this fourth category, this fourth role of Agile leadership, these are not people involved in the day-to-day Scrum process, but these are people who create an environment for agility to flourish, managing impediments and problems in the organization and providing coaching and support to Scrum Masters, product owners, and teams. If you are Chief Learning Officer, Chief Product Officer, Chief Technology Officer, or other executive, if you are a Senior Vice President, or another senior management position, this is you. You create the environment and create the safe space for all of this to happen. So, the product owner works with stakeholders to define and drive product strategy, maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. The Scrum Master provides coaching to the team on Scrum process and facilitates team interaction and communication. And Agile leaders create an environment where all of this can happen. One of the regular activities of the product owner is maintaining the product backlog of work to be done. They regularly review and refine this backlog, typically no less frequently than every 1 or 2 weeks, to bring the next most important priorities to the top. In my product backlogs, I track work to be done as epics. Epics are typically large, loosely defined ideas that capture key value to be delivered to customers. Epics usually represent more than a week's worth of work. You'll see here in a minute how epics are broken down into smaller stories for design and development. The cross-functional Scrum team works in relatively short cycles of effort, known as sprints, which are typically 2 weeks long. The Scrum team also maintains a backlog of work to be done in each sprint called the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is separate from the product backlog and represents a breakdown of epics from the top of the product backlog into smaller stories that are forecast to be completed during the current sprint. This collaborative team effort To break epics from the top of the product backlog down into stories and add them to the sprint backlog is called sprint planning and is led by the Scrum Master. During sprint planning, members of the cross-functional team look at a particular epic from the product backlog and identify work that needs to be done in order to design, develop, test, and release it. Sprint planning typically happens every 2 weeks at the beginning of each new sprint or at the tail end of the previous sprint. Once the 2-week sprint is started, the Scrum Master holds a daily scrum that lasts no more than 15 minutes to provide the team an opportunity to review progress toward the sprint goal. Daily scrum is not a status meeting. These are not workers reporting status to a project planner or manager. This is shared accountability in working toward a common goal. Daily scrums improve communications, identify impediments, promote quicker decision-making, and consequently eliminate the need for other meetings. One of the most rewarding Agile events happens at the end of the sprint, the end of sprint review and team demos. During this meeting, each member of the team has a chance to show the results of what they worked on during the sprint. This gives the entire team visibility into what has been accomplished. This is also the point at which the product owner decides whether or not the work completed is ready to be released to customers with the next incremental update to the software. Features that are not ready for release are sent back to the product backlog to be continued or elaborated on at some point in the future, or back into sprint planning to be continued during the following sprint. So all of this happens in a 2-week sprint cycle. Targeted features move from the product backlog into sprint planning, where they're broken down into smaller stories and added to the sprint backlog. They are then designed, developed, and tested during the sprint, with coordination and communication being facilitated through a short daily stand-up meeting called Daily Scrum. At the end of the sprint, accomplishments are shared during the end of sprint review and team demos, and then new features and functionalities are released as part of a small incremental update to the software. Okay, so we've talked about Waterfall and Agile software development. To summarize, for Waterfall, the plan is defined upfront in advance. For Agile, it unfolds incrementally. For Waterfall, the schedule is based on a cycle of design and development that may last several months or even years. For Agile, it's based on a cycle of design and development that repeats every 2 to 8 weeks. Changes to the plan in Waterfall happen only when there are unforeseen issues or adjustments need to be made in order to meet hard delivery dates. In Agile, adjustments are driven by a constant loop of feedback from stakeholders and customers. In order to manage risk, costs, and scheduled commitments, Waterfall is more rigid and resistant to change, whereas in Agile, change is expected. All right, let's take a break and go to John for an audience survey question.
Okay, thank you, Christian. And with everything Christian's talking about right there, we're really getting into this topic of learning culture, the way that your organization really looks at learning, the way it's perceived. And we're really getting into this idea that there's a new concept, a new way of thinking about learning in a more agile way. So if anybody could just grab your camera, scan this QR code that's up here. I'll give everybody a moment to scan it, and then it's going to just ask you to type in 2 words that describe your learning culture currently. This is always fun for us to do because everybody has a different perspective on where they're at currently with their learning culture, what they feel about it. And so you always get a lot of different perspectives here, which is fun for us to see. So just one more moment here. You can scan that QR code with your camera and then just type in a couple words that represent your learning culture. And then I'm going to flip over here. And we can see them come up here as everybody's entering them. So non-existent is one that you hear sometimes. Obviously, you know, it's funny because they're all kind of equal here. Sometimes one word really, as this is a word cloud, one word really stands out to us. But we've got a pretty even mix here. Some are, you know, boring or static or passive, while we've got some other words up here like awesome and continuous and growth, but then also not coordinated, unplanned. And that's one of those things that Christian's really talking about. How do we get the whole organization to contribute in an agile way, but then it still stays planned and coordinated through this central source? So thank you for contributing. It's always great to see that. And I'm going to pass it back to Christian, knowing some of the vibe about everybody's learning culture. We'll continue on with the talk now.
Okay, so let's talk about how this applies to instructional design or learning design and delivery. The ADDIE model is considered by many to be the waterfall for instructional design, even though by the mid-1980s it was used in a more dynamic way for at least some applications. Two agile alternatives to ADDIE are SAM, the successive approximation model, and LLAM, the lot-like agile management approach. Michael Allen and Richard Seitz introduced the successive approximation model in their 2012 book, Leaving ADDIE for SAM. In this model, an initial preparation phase here on the left is followed by two iterative design and development phases that address performance needs through repeated small steps rather than perfectly executed giant steps prior to rollout. Megan Torrance has also been writing and teaching about the application of Agile principles to instructional design since 2012. LLAM begins with analysis and design in the first iteration and then continues with subsequent iterations of implementation, evaluation, design, and development. Both of these models, SAM and LLAM, take advantage of three reasons for applying Agile principles to instructional design. The first is to ensure that you're building the right product. The day you begin a project is when you know the least about it. These models allow for learning, adaptation, and refinement along the way to make sure you're pursuing and ultimately delivering the right target. The second is to get the design right. Through successive iteration of design and development with evaluation, you are able to validate whether or not your instruction is usable, desirable, and effective. That is, whether or not it will enable learners to meet learning objectives. The third reason is that the Agile approach provides a way to manage an iterative design and development process. But there's something missing here. Let me give you one more. A fourth reason for applying Agile principles to the process of learning, design, and development is the potential to deliver continuous value to learners. So rather than simply an iterative, incremental, and collaborative process for completing an instructional design project, what I'm talking about here is continuous value delivery to learners consistently over time. This fits very well with how Agile applies to learning in today's fast-paced, high-tech world. And this isn't something that's coming top-down. We haven't taught learners how to do this. This is something that already happens, that learners are doing on their own, that we now in our learning and development teams and initiatives are starting to take advantage of. Learners are naturally employing Agile tactics to their own learning because of the technology that's available to them and out of necessity. They don't have large windows of time for training, but are able to consume it when it comes in the form of microlearning, small bites, just in time, just enough, anytime, anywhere, especially mobile. It also fits well with our business and organizational development initiatives to create cultures of learning at all levels of the organization and to promote peer-to-peer and group-to-group collaboration and sharing of knowledge and skills. So if we put all four of these reasons together now, building the right learning product, getting the design right, managing the design, development, and delivery process, and delivering continuous value to learners, the result is that we're able to provide what learners need effectively and regularly on an ongoing basis. Please note here that what I'm talking about is not an iterative approach to design or development and prototyping for feedback along the way. What I'm talking about here is an Agile process where the output is complete, usable learning released to learners at the end of each 2-week cycle. Each iteration includes all 5 steps of identifying target requirements, designing, developing, testing, and releasing usable learning. What I would like to share with you now is my own personal case study as a manager of training and development for product training in a software company, and how this experience ultimately led me to the concept of activating peer-to-peer knowledge streams in my organization. Knowledge streams incorporate all 4 of the Agile benefits we just looked at, plus a strategy for doing it at scale. Okay, so here's my story. A few years ago, while working at a software product company in the office of the CTO, overseeing UX design and customer experience for several products, I took on the challenge of building a product training program for both internal and external training. My starting point was this: I needed up-to-date training and a process and pipeline for adding to that training with each new feature release of each product for multiple products. And that training needed to be delivered to employees, customers, and partners. I had a large repository of outdated or soon-to-be irrelevant training content that had been created in Adobe Captivate or Articulate Storyline, for which we no longer had the source files, at least for many of them. I had no training team, I had no instructional design team, I had no headcount, and I had 0 budget. My approach to solving this problem was threefold. I needed to create a team. I needed to identify key strategies that would make the problem tractable, and I needed to identify tools and technologies to help me get the job done. There was no budget, so I wasn't going to get any additional headcount, but I did have an existing open position for a UX creative director that I needed to backfill. I was able to repurpose this headcount and split it into two positions, a senior UX designer, which would satisfy the business needs I had on my UX design team, and a new position for a senior instructional designer. And so I did that. I split the headcount, created the new position, and hired a senior instructional designer. And she was amazing. We were very fortunate to find someone with her level of experience and qualification. But that was it. That was all I was going to get. Just one senior instructional designer. Not a pair of instructional designers, not a team of instructional designers, just one. And here's how far that got me. Where before I had nothing but a boneyard of outdated training materials and artifacts, I now had the ability to update or create new training material. She could work with our subject matter experts. She could create new instruction, and she could deliver new up-to-date training for our products. But it was several products, and all of these products were growing and changing constantly. And there was no way she could possibly keep up with the demand. And so as capable and talented and skilled and amazing as she was, she effectively became a bottleneck in the process of getting new knowledge and skills to our learners. That led to step 2. I needed to identify key strategies that would enable us to deliver up-to-date knowledge and provide skills training continuously from those who have it to those who need it with only one instructional designer. As I thought this through and talked it over with my team as well as other stakeholders in the organization, I made a few notes and observations. First, our products are always evolving and changing. Second, anything we create today will need to be updated or replaced. Fortunately, in today's world, there's a much lower bar for content quality than there has been in the past. For example, think about YouTube videos and how people consume them. And knowledge consumers prefer content with an acceptable level of quality now over content with a higher level of quality later or too late. They also generally prefer to consume it in small bites of microlearning, just in time and just enough to do what they need to do. All of these things, coupled with the fact that our content was very technical and coming almost exclusively from subject matter experts, led me to my breakthrough moment. I realized that our senior instructional designer could take on a new role. Instead of being a bottleneck in the process for getting knowledge from subject matter experts to learners, having to interview, capture, review, synthesize, organize, format, style, and reconstitute knowledge using sophisticated multimedia production tools, she could become an orchestrator of the flow of knowledge, facilitating knowledge streams within our learning community at a scale and pace previously unattainable. A constant flow of knowledge provided in almost real time to the people who needed it in order to competently perform their jobs and use our products. The idea of user-generated content was not a novel idea, but the role of the instructional designer becoming an orchestrator, facilitating an agile process for continuous value delivery, was a unique concept that would enable all of our subject matter experts at scale to contribute directly to the flow of knowledge. We had 3 strategies to make this happen. Number 1, deliver microlearning to meet learners' most important needs in small, reusable, repurposable chunks that could be consumed individually or strung together later into larger courses, certification programs, or learning pathways. Number 2, enable direct contribution from subject matter experts and make that our primary source of training content. Number 3, have our instructional designer orchestrate the process by providing templates to have consistent design and encourage best practices for learning and instruction. For example, stating objectives and providing context before demonstrating a task. And also facilitating an agile design and delivery process, which meant functioning as a product owner, maintaining a backlog of training content to be created, and functioning as a Scrum Master, holding sprint planning meetings to target work to be done and holding team demos for show and tell. All right, let's go back to John for another audience survey question.
Okay, thanks, Christian. And so at this point in the presentation, we'd love to hear from all of you again about what your current sources of learning content are. So as we're talking about this new model for creating learning content in a more agile way, it's always good to check in with everyone on where they're actually getting their content from currently. We know there's lots of different sources. You're either developing it internally with your ID team, you are purchasing it off the shelf, hiring an outsourced development company to do it for you. or leveraging other libraries. Or as we say in this Agile model, you may already be tapping into your subject matter experts internally. So if you scan that QR code like before, you can make your vote. And I'll give everyone just one more moment to scan it and vote. And then I'm going to flip over here and we can see what we're hearing from everybody. So pretty equal across the board. It's always interesting to see. And I think right here, we're seeing that it's just about the same for everyone: internal ID team, outsourced development, employee contributions, and just one tick below the off-the-shelf libraries. And that's pretty consistent. We've seen in all of our presentations that off-the-shelf libraries are used less and less than we might have seen in the past. But it's always encouraging to see when we're talking about this agile learning model that a lot of people are already engaging their employees and internal subject matter experts to get content contributed, because what Christian is talking about is just an easier way to facilitate that and make it happen. So thank you everyone for contributing, and I'm going to pass it back to Christian now to continue with the content.
All right, thank you. So in my experience, step one for me was to create a team. Step two was to identify strategies to deliver up-to-date knowledge continuously. My third step was to identify tools and technologies that could be used to enable this model of direct subject matter expert contribution, provide consistency and a reasonable level of quality in content produced, and facilitate delivery of this content to learners. A few key observations here were that, number one, most of the raw material for new content in reality was coming from Zoom meetings, recorded live events, Word documents, and PowerPoints. Number two, knowledge consumers preferred a combination of screen share video recordings and written guides, especially for technical process where there's a lot of interactive software or system configuration. Number three, a recorded Zoom session was sufficient. Desktop screen recordings with a fancy tool like Camtasia weren't necessary. And number four, recording demonstrations with a live audience had the added benefit of being able to capture Q&A as part of the recording. Based on these observations, our core tools and technology became PowerPoint decks and demos of new features in the software product itself. These presentations were then delivered live and recorded using Zoom. Sometimes they were supplemented with text-based guides created in Microsoft Word, and all of them were posted to our learning management system. Note here that in addition to providing a delivery vehicle, posting this content to our LMS had the added benefit of being able to collect usage analytics. We could see who viewed and completed the training and how much time they spent. Our LMS also gave us the ability to add automatically scored knowledge comprehension checks. The end result was continuous value delivery to our learners. Knowledge streams that carried information from those who had it to those who needed it in almost real time. In our application of Agile principles in the Scrum framework to learning and development and delivery, our instructional designer functioned as product owner to identify and prioritize learner needs. She also functioned as Scrum Master, facilitating interaction and communication for an adjunct cross-functional development team comprised of subject matter experts from within our organization. As an instructional designer, she provided coaching and guidance to subject matter experts, provided templates for them to use, created or helped them create knowledge checks or learner activities, and monitored usage and completion reports in the learning platform to know which learning was effective. As product owner, our instructional designer maintained a backlog of learning and training to be developed. This backlog was fed primarily by new features being released in our products, recurring support issues where training was identified as the best solution to close the gap and prevent future support calls, and feedback from stakeholders, mostly our customer success team, relating problems and opportunities discovered while onboarding new customers. As Scrum Master, she held a sprint planning every 2 weeks to identify the targets to focus on in the coming 2-week sprint. She also held a daily scrum with her team of subject matter experts who were working on creating the training. At the end of the 2-week sprint, she would hold a sprint review and team demo and make a decision on whether or not the training modules developed were ready to release to learners. The output of each sprint was one or more micro-learning modules that were added to channels in our learning platform. Just a few weeks ago at the Adobe Digital Experience Conference, Malcolm Gladwell gave a presentation entitled, "A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste." His session was about rethinking organizational rule books for the post-COVID world. In this session, he asserted a prediction that decentralized, self-organizing networks are the way of the future over traditional top-down hierarchical ways of doing things. This is exactly what we're talking about here. Knowledge streams are an example of a facilitated peer-to-peer self-organizing network. This is the future. This is your future should you choose to be part of it. If not, it's going to happen without you. It already is. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to John Toda now, eLearning Brothers Rockstar Learning Evangelist, to show an example of what it might look like for you to activate knowledge streams in your organization, to activate a flow of peer-to-peer knowledge using your learning platform. He'll be showing this example in the Rockstar Learning Platform, but this approach and these techniques are not specific to any one tool or technology and can be implemented using a variety of tools. Hopefully the tools you already have in place, but if not, put this on your list of must-have criteria as you're planning your learning technology strategy for the future.
Okay, thank you, Christian, and thanks everybody for being here. And what I really want to do in this part is just talk to you quickly about a use case and a case study that we executed internally. And as Christian said, of course, we do it in our platform called Rockstar Learning here at eLearning Brothers, but you could do this in any platform. It's more a philosophy of agile learning design and agile learning models. So if you take a look at this, one of the things that we talked about and what Christian spoke about a lot earlier was activating knowledge streams as a core aspect of an effective agile learning model. You want to open up these two-way channels for knowledge sharing across your organization. And one of the biggest problems is, how do you source content from your subject matter experts? How do you make it easy for a business user who is not an admin in your learning platform to get content in there so that it can be reviewed and potentially utilized with a larger audience? So in our case, we have our growth team internally that we're both on. And one of the things that we created, if you could see here in the upper left-hand corner of that screenshot in Rockstar Learning, you see that we have channels. These are individual secure knowledge streams that certain groups of users are invited to so that they can share their knowledge with each other. As you can see right in the middle there, the contributions in our platform, we call them contributions. So a subject matter expert who's in this growth team with us, they can post a contribution from anywhere, anytime. As we said earlier, they can do it from a mobile device. Very simply, as you can see, the media, the content here is not very advanced. We're not asking them to author content using a tool. They're using our platform that makes it very simple to just type in text, upload a photo, take a picture with your phone, capture a video, add a YouTube link. Some of those really simple things that any user can do from anywhere to grab content from these third-party sources. You always hear people talk about LXP, that LXP model, learning experience design. Christian and I have studied it quite a bit. And we really think of that as being more just an agile learning model where anybody, anywhere, using any device can capture just-in-time learning and share it with their peers. And that's what we're doing here. So at any time, I can capture the results of a growth experiment. I could just grab a video like I did here, post it on a simple page, publish it to the knowledge stream. And then as you see in the upper right, that stream is just a collection of posts. No different in a way than a simple blog post, just with more multimedia capabilities. And now it gives our instructional design team or the manager of our learning platform the ability to review that content that's been captured very easily from anywhere and then share it with the larger population. And one of the ways that we share, and we talked about this a little bit in Christian's presentation, was socializing peer-based knowledge. So we all know at this stage that a lot of the best knowledge and learning that's available in your organization may not always be sitting in your training department, but it's our responsibility as a training department to source that content, to get it into our platform as easily as possible. And one of the ways that we're doing that is what we call boards. And these are playlists, if you will. So we have a growth team playlist. These are things that I see in the platform that I want to socialize. So there's two aspects of this in the agile learning model, is that we want our subject matter experts to easily be able to contribute content from anywhere using any device without having to use a fancy authoring tool, get it to a point where our instructional design team can review it and make sure they want to use it. And then once it's out there, how can we make it very easy for learners to socialize content with their peers? So it's not always this top-down approach but instead it's a bottom-up approach and it's a side-to-side approach so that peers are able to socialize that learning that's coming from anywhere. And as Christian said earlier in the presentation, what we're really committed to is taking that instructional designer or the admin of your learning platform out of that role of being a bottleneck, being the only one that can get content into the platform, and really converting from a gatekeeper to an orchestrator, really putting these tools in place so that anybody can contribute content from anywhere. And then once it's there, we as learners can all socialize and share it with each other if it's been effective for us. And that's what we're just doing here. I can share it simply by email with anyone. So just a couple fun things that we like to show, because we're actually using these same strategies internally. And on this screen here, for anyone who doesn't know, we offer the Rockstar Learning Platform at no charge for your first 5 learners. And that's not a trial. It is a fully functional, free version of the application. You can scan that QR code or just go to elearningbrothers.com. And when you get there, just go to the Rockstar Learning page. You can sign up and instantly within minutes have a fully featured Rockstar Learning account that you can use for as long as you need for up to 5 learners to build out an agile learning model, to do some of the things Christian talked about today for your own. And we love that, because we think as learning professionals ourselves, a 30-day trial, 60-day trial sometimes is not enough. You need that sandbox to be able to play with concepts like building an agile learning model. And this is our way to support you doing that. So I'll pass it back to Christian to say some closing comments, and then we are available for the next 8 minutes to do Q&A with you on any topic you'd like.
Thanks, John. So let's see, Kristen, do we have any questions that have come in?
We do. We have Alyssa Reed. She is asking, what are common missteps that you see from those implementing Agile for the first time, and ways to avoid these missteps?
I think one of them is people taking kind of a large, very formal waterfall process and just trying to make it happen faster and smaller. There's some things that need to change a little bit culturally to really be successful there. So instead of just taking a top-down kind of accountability to management type process and putting it into a smaller increment, you really need to create this sense of a team culture. We're all part of a team. We have a shared goal that we're working towards, and then we have some process and method in place to facilitate communication and coordination of the efforts that we're working towards. So I think that's probably one of the biggest.
Okay. And it looks like that's really about it. We do also have a free ebook that was written by yours truly, Christian and John, and it is in the chat for everybody to check out. And I think that's really about it, Christian and John. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer.
Okay, this concludes our webcast today. I'd like to thank the presenters as well as all of you for joining us. If you joined late and would like to view this webcast again, the recording and slides will be available on hr.com in our archived virtual events. Your HRCI credit will show up in your hr.com account within 2 business days. We will also send you an email with the credit information. Please take a few moments to fill out the webcast survey that will open on your screen once I end this webcast. Your feedback is important to us. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day and this event.